Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with my NXT review for July 20th, 2021. I apologize for there being no NXT or AEW reviews last week. As Jay mentioned on the Raw review in the Control Center, I was on assignment with ROH doing the Best in the World weekend stuff. And like what happened the previous time I was out there in the ROH bubble back in May, I was just too tired and didn't have the time or the energy to try and cover those other shows after everything we did during the day. So I apologize for that. I'm back here now, back into the swing of things. Let's begin and see how NXT did this week. And as always, like what you like, don't be a dick. The show begins with Samoa Joe making his way into the ring, not wearing a dapper suit as usual, but he's dressed like ready for a street fight it seems, calls out Karrion Kross after what happened last week when he refereed the title match with Kross and Gargano, then Karrion choked him out after the proceedings and everything. But Willie Reeks comes out and he wants none of this. He wants no violence, he wants things to stay peaceful, but Joe says even though he respects Regal, he cannot promise things will end peacefully by the time the night is over because he is going to confront Karrion Kross at some point in the evening. So some good tension to start the show here, and we'll talk about how the storyline goes along, how the arc goes forth as the show does. Xia Li with a promo package talking about Raquel Gonzalez in the title match later tonight, saying it's the most important match of her life. And then we go to our first match of the evening as Roderick Strong and Tyler Rust, the Diamond Mine, take on Bobby Fish and Kushida, who actually jumped the Diamond Mine before the match officially begins. Not much to say about this one. It's just great technical skills from like both sides of the coin here. The Diamond Mine do look pretty good here, but ultimately Kushida ends up putting Rust in a very clever hoverboard lock, kind of a cool way he got into that, for he and Bobby Fish to win. So the rift between Roddy and Bobby Fish still strong here. You see what I did there? And of course this feud not over yet. We get a shot of outside the building where Cameron Grimes, dressed in his full butler getup, drives LA Knight to the building. And you know what? Even though Cameron is an indentured servant of LA Knight to this point, still has a lot of sass. I do like that point where it's not just LA just browbeating Cameron. He has to sit there stoically and quietly and just take it. Like, he's kind of got some barbs back LA's way and stuff. So kind of keeping that going. I like how in that sense they're still kind of like rivals and it's not like a master subservient sort of thing like on paper with the Butler thing. So Grimes has to pick up all 5 of LA's ridiculous bags from the back seat. Drake Maverick shows up and wants to help out, but Cameron does not want his help. And LA takes exception to Drake kind of meddling and calls him out for a match later in the night. And then after that, we get a hype package for Odyssey Jones as he prepares for his match for the breakout tournament later in the night. You know, I dig his look, I dig his name, I'm looking forward to seeing that match of his. Frankie Monet takes on JC Jane up next, and Monet is accompanied to the ring by Jesse Kamea, and then about a minute in the match, we see Robert Stone show up, try and get in Frankie's corner as well. Appears to be trying to sweet talk Kamea during the match. And then a few minutes after that, we see Mandy Rose appear on the announce desk, kind of scouting the action here in this matchup. Mandy did re-debut for NXT last week. Appears to be some kind of trade for, I guess, losing Shotzi and Nox. Now we've got Mandy Rose back in the black and yellow brand. So as the match goes on, it's not a typical squash match. Like, JC gets a few good moves in near the end on Monet when she's distracted by what's going on, because there's a lot of things happening now outside the ring as this match happens. But Monet recovers and hits the glam slam to win, and then Mandy Rose disappears. But a very interesting web we are weaving here, because a few weeks ago we saw Mandy, or Frankie I should say, planting seeds of dissent with like the Robert Stone brand. Now she's got Kamea in her corner, and then we don't know where Robert Stone plays into this, like in the aftermath of all that and the fallout, and where does Mandy Rose fit into all this? A lot of interesting layers that it's developing from this like singular like women's angle, and it's very curious right now. I'm very interested to see where it goes. Backstage with Johnny Gargano, where he's asked about his title match loss against Karrion Kross last week, Kyle O'Reilly shows up and takes umbrage to what Austin Theory said about him in his Wade Barrett interview last week. And so basically he takes a couple shots at Theory for being dumb, wants a match with him later in the night, so we get that. And then Gargano tells Theory afterward he's got to go it alone. And speaking of sit-down interviews with Wade Barrett, we've got Bronson Reed sitting with Wade for this one. And Reed's asked about losing the North American Championship, and he talks about how he has to bounce back after everything he accomplished with that title win now all kind of like taken away so soon, and how he's going to give Adam Cole what for next week, and he's going to finish what he started. We go to that match now with Kyle O'Reilly versus Austin Theory. Some great back and forth here, and I will say this about Theory as a worker. Like, in all the times you see him lose here, and he does lose in this match to O'Reilly via submission, he's got the heel hook and everything, he never looks bad in defeat. He always has these really competitive matches and ends up looking almost stronger at the end of it despite losing than he did going into it. And I think that's a great quality in him as a performer. So that being said, I think it was a good match for that to that end. It made Kyle look good for winning, and Austin still looking good going on his own the way he did. And it's just more valiant kind of like world building or trying to make the way, I guess, more babyface in that sense. Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai say they're not concerned about Xia Li challenging for the championship later on. And then we see Legato Del Phantasma in the ring for a mariachi mayhem musical segment of some kind. But we got like Legato Del Phantasma in the ring, and there's two like masked mariachi guys in there with them. Santos immediately tells him to go away because he doesn't want to go down to Hit Row's level where he vomits out some lyrics and everything. He makes a very astute observation here. He's like, what is this, some kind of styles clash between Legato Del Phantasma and Hit Row? Takes some more shots of the group there, and then Hit Row finally show up. You've got Ashante, Top Dollar, and B-Fab all kind of talking trash about the group. Then ending with Swerve. He actually brings up how last year it took all three members of the group to beat Swerve when he was challenging Santos for the Cruiserweight Championship, so consider this a bit of payback. We get a faction scrap in the ring as all the guys start fighting each other. At one point, Santos almost El Kabongs Swerve with a guitar, but B-Fab takes the guitar from him. Santos escapes, but Joaquin Wilde does not. He ends up getting hit in the back with a guitar by Swerve, and so Hit Row standing tall here. So are Hit Row already kind of like faces now, or are they just kind of like hip tweeners who lean face because they've got that cool factor about them, and when they're going against Legato Del Phantasma, they're going to be cheered regardless? So I'm very curious to see how this feud's going to go and where Hit Row goes from here. Will they be kind of like face or heel depending on how the plot requires it, or are they just kind of like, are they faces now? Backstage in the Ways locker room, Candice LeRae is coming down on them for all the misfortunes as of late and their losses and whatnot. And Indy says not to come down so hard on them, saying, in regards to Theory, if he wants to kiss Dexter, let him kiss Dexter. Bit of a Freudian slip there. But anyway, as they're bickering, the three of them, Johnny and Indy and Candice, Austin just wants the family to stop fighting and stop tearing itself apart. But no one listens to poor Austin as he sadly walks away, which made me sad too. I don't want them to break up the Way. It is one of the best things about NXT right now, on a show with a lot of very good things about it, in particular the groups. And then elsewhere backstage, Regal keeps trying to calm down Samoa Joe, but that man cannot be calmed. We go to our next first round match in the Breakout Tournament as Andre Chase, the former Harlem Bravado, takes on Odyssey Jones. Real quick clarification I want to make from 2 weeks ago when they brought out all the participants in the tournament on stage. I erroneously said that Duke Hudson was the former Anthony Henry. I meant to say he was the former Brendan Vink. My apologies. Anyway, the match itself here, fairly short. Chase just kind of like flies all over the place to try and get some offense in on Odyssey, but the man just keeps kicking out. Short comeback, sidewalk slam to win and advance in the tournament. For my first exposure to Odyssey Jones in the ring, I know he's done some 205 Live stuff before, but considering this is my first time seeing him in a match, I thought he did okay. I know he's got a lot of hype behind him. I wouldn't be surprised, just based on the hype alone and just kind of seeing this, that he, I wouldn't be surprised if he made the finals, let's just say. I think that in this first shorter match, it was an okay showing, but the real test is going to come when the matches get longer later in the tournament, and then just naturally, the more he goes up the card in NXT. We get some tag team promos up next, backstage with MSK, where they say they welcome any and all challengers, and they're asked about what MSK actually stands for. And before they get too far into it, the promo is interrupted or hijacked by another promo with Imperium. It's a Russian nesting doll of promos, of tag team promos here. So Imperium says the tag division's a joke and they're going to take it back. And then we come back to the end of the MSK promo where they've just wrapped up their origin story. So maybe one day we'll hear from them. And then after the break, we hear from Pete Dunne and Oni Lorcan, who challenge Tommaso Ciampa and Timothy Thatcher to a scrap, and I can't wait for that one. LA Knight takes on Drake Maverick up next based on what we saw in the earlier bit outside the building. LA Knight is adamant that Cameron Grimes hold up the $1 Million Championship high above his head, so every time he doesn't do that, LA is distracted and kind of scolds him for it. Finally, at the end, he just kind of like physically holds it up in place for where he wants it to be held. Drake drop kicks him from behind, and he takes a header into his own $1 Million Championship. Drake ends up winning winning, but LA gets the last laugh here, just beats the hell out of Drake afterward, and Grimes wants it to stop, but LA ups the ante and tells him, if you want to honor the deal here, we have you being the butler, you have to do what I say, and you have to knock out Drake Maverick. It's very reminiscent of when the Big Show punched out Dusty Rhodes in, I believe it was 2013, but it was the same kind of thing where Cameron doesn't want to do it, ultimately he has to, and so he's kind of like, he's resigned to his fate, or he understands what his fate is now, kind of like being bossed around by LA. And again, like, I am loving this storyline. I don't know why I talked smack about it in the beginning era of Cameron Grimes, the rich guy, and meddling with Ted DiBiase, because right now, where they're taking it, I'm really enjoying it. Outside, Samoa Joe still looking for Karrion Kross, basically grabbing any random bald person he can find, trying to look for him. Then we go to our main event, the Women's Championship match, Raquel Gonzalez defending against Xia Li. Some pretty good back and forth in here. I think Li holds her own against Raquel, and I think Raquel's comeback here, and when she gets her momentum going, I think she looks pretty strong as well. After Raquel makes a comeback, though, she does kind of a twisting elbow drop out of like a Vader bomb position out of the corner. Seems to really hurt Xia on that landing, kind of squishes her ribs or the side or something, because Xia is just like, she can't really move after the kick out and everything. The referee stops it and creates separation. Trainers are looking at Xia during this thing, and she gets back up just for enough time to get caught in the one-arm powerbomb, and the match is over. So basically kind of prolonging and delaying the inevitable here. I thought it was a good match up until the end when that injury happened, and that kind of like derailed things. Really bad luck for Xia Li the last few weeks, because there's last week or 2 weeks ago when she kicked Mercedes Martinez in the head and knocked her out with the Aaron kick, and now this week she gets hurt in this big matchup here. You hate to see it. I hope everyone is okay, but yeah, kind of an awkward ending to an otherwise decent matchup. And then after the match is over, Samoa Joe comes out again looking for Karrion Kross. Karrion shows up on the big screen. Well, it's kind of a little screen all told. He shows up on the screen and he's got commandeered the camera. He shows, he's the champion and he can do whatever he wants and hurt whoever he wants. And he tilts down the camera to see William Regal is knocked out on the ground of the parking lot, and Samoa Joe is livid. He runs after Kross, and Kross says, who's in control of who, and consider yourself provoked and everything. He leaves as Joe chases after him and is very mad and everything. I like how this ended on kind of a cliffhanger note. I'm liking the Samoa Joe Karrion Kross storyline right now and how pissed Joe is. I wasn't expecting we're going to maybe get a match. It feels like we're going to get a match with these two sooner than later, but we'll have to see how that goes. Like I said, I'm liking it. And everything is fine right now in NXT, if only we didn't see Karrion lose to Jeff Hardy on Raw this Monday. Now, look, I know that not everyone who watches Raw also watches NXT. I get that. There's going to be some people who don't know who Karrion is. But the first sin they committed here was having him come out on Raw without Scarlett. I think Scarlett's a huge part of the whole package deal of Karrion Kross right now. And without her there, Karrion, it doesn't look, the whole package doesn't look the same thing. So that was the first strike against them. Then he loses to Jeff Hardy in a relatively short amount of time. And this is a guy they've spent a year and a half just like building on NXT as this unstoppable monster. And Jeff Hardy beats him as short as he did, and he cheated to do it too. So whatever's going on with that, like maybe this thing on Raw is going to be much ado about nothing, and it will ultimately just be okay. But I mean, I think if as an audience member and as someone who does watch multiple aspects of the product, like WWE tells you to essentially, they want you to watch all the shows. They want you to watch the entire WWE universe and just keep abreast of everything going on. So how insulting is it if you watch NXT and see just how they spent so long having Karrion run roughshod the whole roster for him to show up with the belt, without Scarlett, losing the way he did to Jeff Hardy? It's like, why bother? Why even do it? That match did not have to happen the way it did. I just don't understand all the work WWE has done since 2019 to build NXT up as a legitimate third brand. And there's that, and then there was, Survivor Series 2 years ago, Charlotte winning the Women's Championship at WrestleMania. To do stuff like this just seems to go against that and just make NXT so lesser than. If I were Karrion and Triple H, I'd be pretty furious. But now that I finally said my piece on that, my grade for NXT this week, in which Raw has no factor in, by the way, is a B+. I think it was a really strong episode of the show. The matches themselves, take them or leave them, they were fine and they were athletic and they were competitive and everything. The one negative I have about this week's show is just Xia Li's injury at the very end of that title match and everything. The matches themselves, fine, but what really hooked me this week were the stories. They elevated at least 3 or 4 major storylines going on all across all tiers of the card. Samoa Joe and Karrion Kross, Hit Row, Legato Del Phantasma, LA Knight, Cameron Grimes, even a bit of the Frankie Monet stuff and where Mandy Rose fits into all that. There was a lot of world building, a lot of character work that I really enjoyed this week, and just setting things up for future episodes. And I think it was just, story and characters are what always bring me back to wrestling, and I think NXT this week really excelled in that. But what did you think of NXT this week, folks? What do you think of Karrion Kross losing to Jeff Hardy on Raw, and what do you think of the storyline with he and Samoa Joe on NXT, where Raw has no bearing apparently? I want to hear what you have to say in the comment section below. Stay tuned for tomorrow night, because I'll be back with the AEW review of Fyter Fest Night 2. And oh yeah, speaking of Wednesday, in the morning, my long-awaited Suburban Commando review is dropping, so do please check that one out. I'm very proud of how it turned out, and I think you will enjoy it as well. But until then, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.